Open University of Nigeria. I'm here once again for another session of BUS 809, Human Resource Management. Our topic for today is industrial relations. We'll be discussing the key perspectives of industrial relations, objectives of industrial relations, as well as actors in industrial relations. Now, if you're set for this class, just join me as we hit the road. Topic 7, Industrial Relations. Industrial relations or employment relations, or you can say organizational relations, can be described as the complex interrelations between employers and employees, labor unions, employer organizations, and the state. The understanding between employees and management in an industrial organization is commonly called industrial relations. Industrial relations describes the complex, ever-changing relationship between industry management and its employees. And you can now safely say that industrial relations is likened to a coin having two faces, cooperation and conflict. What do we mean by this? This is so because the relationship undergoes change from thesis to antithesis and then to synthesis. Therefore, the relationship starting with cooperation soon changes into conflict, and after its resolution, again changes into cooperation. The changing process becomes a continuous feature in industrial system and makes industrial relation concept a dynamic and evolving one. Encyclopedia Britannica defined industrial relations more elaborately as the concept that has been extended to denote the relations of the state and employers, workers, and other organizations. The subject therefore includes individual relations and joint consultation between employers and workers at their places of work, collective relations between employees and trade unions, and as parts played by the state in regulating these relations. What are the objectives of industrial relations? They are to develop an atmosphere of mutual trust and cooperation, to proffer solutions to problems which arise through agreed proceedings with a minimum expenditure of time, expense, and disruption of work, to promote high employee morale and commitment to organizational goals and objectives, and to develop human resource skills and the encouragement of high productivity. There are various approaches to industrial relations like pluralistic approach, unitary approach, human relations approach, and Marxist approach. But we're going to consider two basic approaches, the pluralistic and unitary approaches. Two major ways of perceiving work organization are the unitary perspective and the pluralistic perspective. The unitary perspective assumes that the organization should be an integral group of people with a single authority structure, and like having a set of common goals, interests, objectives shared by all members of the organization. And it has a paternalistic approach. It demands loyalty of all employees and is managerial in its emphasis and application. Trade unions are deemed unnecessary since the loyalty between employees and management are considered mutually exclusive. The underlying assumption here is that the organizational system is in basic harmony and conflict is unnecessary and exceptional. So in unitarism, the organization is perceived as an integrated and harmonious whole with the idea of one happy family in which management and other members of staff all share a common purpose by emphasizing mutual cooperation. Conflict is perceived as destructive and it is perceived as the result of poor management. The pluralistic perspective accepts the legitimacy of employees combining in formal organizations to express their interests. Yes, by that we mean to influence management decisions and achieve their objectives. So here, the organization is perceived as being made up of powerful and divergent subgroups. And each subgroup has its own legitimate interests and loyalties, and they have their own set of objectives and leaders. And here, the two predominant subgroups in this pluralism perspective are the management and the trade union. And this particular perspective supports that conflict is inherent in dealing with industrial relations, since different subgroups have different opinions in the day-to-day operations. Therefore, trade unions are deemed as legitimate representatives of employees. Here, conflict is about, collective being related to collective bargaining, and it is viewed not necessarily as a bad thing, and especially when it's well managed. In fact, if well managed, it could be channeled towards evolution and positive change. This particular perspective is the opposite of the unitary perspective. Industrial relations has also been viewed as concerned with job regulation, and that is with institutions concerned with the making of rules to regulate and guide the conduct of social partners. When we mean social partners, we're talking about labor and management, and this will always be in an employment situation. So, based on what I've just said, two sets of rules form the main outputs of an industrial relations system, and these are substantive and procedural rules. Let's take them one after the other. Substantive rules. These are concerned essentially with issues of terms of conditions of employment, such as the rates and periodicity of pay, hours of work, holidays, fringe benefits, other employees' entitlements, and so on. On the other hand, procedural rules relate to how and who has authority to make specific rule on substantive issues and the methods to adopt in the decision-making process. For instance, whether decision on pay should be unilaterally or jointly taken by employee and management, and the procedure to adopt when disagreements arise during either the decision-making and or implementation process. These sets of rules may be derived from a number of sources, including legislation, decrees, regulations, trade unions and professional associations rules, collective bargaining agreements, conciliation, arbitration, tribunal and industrial courts, managerial policies and practices, customs and practices. Let's take a pause at this point and complete activity 1. Consider what you have just read about the unitary and the pluralist approaches to employee relations. Which would you consider to be more likely to accept unionization, and which is more likely to resist it? Give reasons for your choice. Actors in industrial relations. Three main actors are identifiable in any industrial relations system, and each of these actors normally presents an infinite permutation of goals, objectives, and values which influence, sustain, and transform the relations process of a firm, industry, and national levels. The actors in the industrial relations system include the state and its agencies, the workers and their representatives, trade unions, and the employers of labor. Let's take them one after the other. The state. In Nigeria, for instance, and even most other countries in the world, the government's roles are managing the nation's economy, maintenance of law and order in the wider society, influencing the development and operations of industrial relations system. So you have specific agencies of the states, and such, for instance, we have the Industrial Arbitration Panel, the National Industrial Court, and you have the Productivity, Price and Income Board. These are examples. And then the second one we have here is the worker and trade union. Or you can say the workers and the trade unions, their representatives are the trade unions. So in terms of industrial relations, these include employees as individuals, employees as work groups, and workers' representatives such as the trade unions, and professional associations. And then finally, we have the employers of labor. This category of actors in the industrial relations system comprises of industrial managers, group of managers as a collective group, and employers as an association, such as Nigerian Employers Consultative Association, known as NECA. Considering actors or parties to industrial relations, we can say here that the employees are represented by trade union, employers being represented by employers association, and you can see the government will as well be represented by courts and tribunals. Let's run down the factors affecting industrial relations. We have individual behavior, organizational structure, psychological factors, leadership style, economic and technical environment, and legal, political environment. Now it's time for activity 2. Consider the organization you work for or one you are familiar with. List all the main actors of industrial relations that operate in it. Identify the objectives of each of the actors, how each is organized, and how each operates. In summary, it is obvious that industrial relations, more than anything else, has to do with people and the structures and processes they design to accommodate their divergent interests, which are constantly generated in their employment relations. While conflict is endemic and inherent in all work situations, it needs not be destructive. The key to a realistic basis for cooperation and effective management of conflict lies in the formulation and implementation of appropriate rules for action to guide day-to-day workplace relations. Effective performance of industrial relations functions is linked to managers' ability to diagnose objectively and dispassionately the nature of problems. Without a set of policy guidelines, consistency in day-to-day management of industrial relations can be difficult to achieve. A policy should form an integral part of a total strategy with which management pursues its corporate objectives. Thank you.